Welcome to the latest episode of the Claws Corner. Today's guest is a poet and the founder of Free Poets Collective. He is also host and founder at the Listening Tree Talk Show and the Goodwill Ambassador of the Woman Scream Festival. Not one to rest on his laurels, though. He is also the host and creator of CCIS, which stands for Connecticut Cryptid Investigative Society. So without further ado, please welcome the multi-talented Colin Haskins to the Claws Corner. Colin, how are you?
I am well, and I'm honored to be here, and I thank you, Rich, for your time. And oh my God, I can't believe you did that much homework, that you dug up my poetry past. And I thought I had sort of left that part of me behind, and with the cryptid thing. But wow, I'm impressed. You did your homework, and thank you. I'm honored to be here.
You are very welcome. I'm honored to have you as a guest. And guess what? We're bringing it back for just a little bit because I find that interesting. I think that I love where you came from and how you got to where you are. So I want to start with that first, and then we'll get into all the cryptid stuff. So before the CCIS, let's talk about Free Poets Collective. What is that, and how did you get that started?
Well, I've started a lot of poetry programs, some that I just won't mention. But Free Poets Collective was born from the ashes of other programs where it sort of got taken away from me, my creation. And that's now happened 3 times. Free Poets Collective was born from those ashes, and that did a lot of successful things with that, had a great time. It's still going, okay? It's still going. I did a anthology of ekphrastic poetry for the New Britain Museum of American Art. That was during Free Poets Collective. I worked with Steepletop at the Edna St. Vincent Millay House and Museum. I've worked with Harriet Beecher Stowe in the Mark Twain House, and I could go on.
Yeah.
But I don't, we're not here for that. We're
most definitely.
What that did do, though, is you saw me on stage at the Paracon. Is 30 years of being on stage prepared me for that again, to speak on the cryptids. So I was very comfortable in front of that audience, and it was a great audience, and I was really happy to feel that again. That I kind of missed that, being on stage, and Paracon brought that back for me, and that sort of reignited me, and that's awesome. And those guys, Nicholas Robert Grossman, I mean, and the whole crew there, Charles Roseny, yourself, and all the others, the people that I got to vend with in the tables and the audience. It was awesome. It was awesome.
Yeah, no, I loved it myself too. And for me, how I got involved was because, just like you, I've been in the spotlight for a long time. I did stand-up comedy for a while. I did motivational talking. I was in bands. So what happened was I interviewed Charles because I've known him for years. And through his trips, I went to Transylvania back in 2005, and he runs these tours. One of the best trips I've ever been on. So I wanted to talk to him about that. And he was talking about Paracon. So then he said, hey, I want to get into this too, because he goes, Rich, I was telling him one of my ghost stories. And because he was mentioning Paracon, I said, well, I told him the story that I had. He goes, would you write that for a book I'm writing? I would love to. And not only am I in that book, but you are. Connecticut Ghost Stories. True Connecticut Ghost Stories right here. And you actually have a great story, which we're going to get into later. But when he goes, do you want to host it? And it was funny because at first he goes, no, just interview a couple people because I'm doing this show. So I interviewed 2 people, and he goes, you just want to introduce this guest? All right. Well, what about the next guest? And finally it ended up being Rich. Just take the mic and do whatever you want. So just like you, I love being in front of people. The bigger the crowd, the better. So many people get so nervous. I love when there's a huge crowd, and they had a pretty, what I love about that crew or that crowd as well is that people that go to these conventions are so open-minded. Like, say you and I, like, I love what you said. We're going to talk about this too, was you're like, let me be the crazy lady, let me be the crazy one, because most people are afraid to mention it. But when you go to a convention like this, everybody's listening. Nobody's going, oh my God, this guy's full of it. So I love being a part of a crowd that's so open-minded. We could talk about the poetry, some other podcasts, because I think it's very interesting. I still want to talk about before the listening.
Talk about Woman Scream.
The
international movement, Woman Scream. It's all about women's rights and
Good.
abuse prevention. And I'm really honored to be part of that. I've been part of it a long time, and that is just an incredible thing. You should definitely talk to Jael about that.
Okay, I will definitely do it. We're gonna,
Yeah.
after this show's over, I'll schedule an interview with her and we'll talk all about that. So you mentioned your business. It's called CCIS, Connecticut Cryptid Investigative Society. How did that begin now? Because you were doing the poetry, and how did you go from poetry, Free Poets Collective, Woman Scream Festival, now to this? That's a big leap.
It would seem so. But I was born in down East Maine, pretty backwoods. And, just being in nature was part of my life well before poetry. And of course, with the arts, that just overlaps. And after 30 years of doing poetry and having done some things, on an international level, some really innovative things that I just won't talk about now. I just wanted to start something different. And I had I am the Connecticut field representative for the North American Dogman Project. Those guys are awesome. And some other things, some other research groups. And I would sort of present evidence that I've gathered in the fields in Connecticut, in the different state forests and state parks. And they didn't really think that Connecticut was that active or merited sort of any sort of attention. And I was just like, this isn't right. I know we're a small state. I know we're highly industrialized, and I have theories on all that and our cryptids. So I just thought about it long and hard. I'll tell you, it wasn't as easy as starting like Free Poets Collective, where there was this obvious opportunity and need, if you will, need for me, and then I saw a need. I was hesitant because I myself suffered from what, and I think you like what I call the culture of ridicule. You're going to get this in the UFO community. You're going to get this in the paranormal community. You're definitely going to get it in the cryptids. With the cryptids, you have misidentification and, just say, well, it's a blurry photo, and you get the same thing. And so with the culture of ridicule, you're sort of afraid to come out and say anything or report an encounter, because your job could depend on it, your marriage could depend on it, your social standing could depend on it, a whole bunch of other things. You could get into some legal troubles with rangers and state parks and stuff like that, and you don't want that. So having thought about it long and hard, I'm like, well, I want CSIS to be a place where people can report things. And like you mentioned, there's a sighting of a woman in West Hartford. When I contacted her, she didn't want to report her sighting. And so, like I said at the convention, well, then I'll be the crazy lake monster lady. She doesn't want to be, well, I will be. I'm not afraid. I am the crazy lake monster lady. And you can send me your reports, and I'll give you a sort of an anonymous identity, but we'll talk about your encounters. And we get some really, really highly unusual reports. I'm going to say that. Really stuff that, you just know you could not just invent, because I'm about as crazy as they get. And I'm telling you, stuff that we're getting, people are reporting to us is just wow. We could talk about it, but that's why I wanted to have a place for our beloved state of Connecticut to have its own sort of, society that focuses on. Then we have a small team. We have a very small presence on Facebook, but we have a very large presence on Instagram and YouTube. And it's mostly myself and the camera person and a guest here and there. And we have some field reps who'll go check out some of the more distant reports than we are in the northwest corner. So that's why. And there is also ACES, as I thought when I created this, that, well, this might grow. And I thought, well, I'll make the American Cryptid Investigative Society, so that we can move eventually, sort of set up the same sort of model in other states.
I like it.
Yeah, we at first I was going to call it the National Cryptid Investigative Society, and I said, well, no, that's NCIS, and somebody might have already taken that one. So, oh, this is important. I wanted it to be fun. I said, if
Yes.
the very beginning when I first talked about this, we're well over 100 investigations and videos into this now, a couple of years running. But it had to be fun, and it still is fun. Just watch the episode where I ate skunk cabbage. You want to laugh till you cry. Okay. Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that was at the park in Burlington, Sessions Woods.
Yes, it was.
I
Okay, you
did
did
see
your
that.
homework.
That was funny. I didn't watch all 100 plus videos. I did see a lot of them though, getting ready for this interview, and I love what you do. And what you just said made it fun because I could tell you were having fun, and it made it more interesting for me because I'm watching you. You're just enjoying going through the woods, having your little commentary, making jokes here and there. You had some facts about the place. So that being said,
Yes.
As you mentioned, I met you at the Paracon in Ansonia last month. And
yes.
I just went through a list of all the different things that you talked about. So if you don't mind, if you have some time, I want to go through some of these on the list because I found this fascinating. And if I left something out, please feel free to add it. So I want to start with pale or scary crawlers. What the hell is that?
Oh my God. So we're getting a lot of these reports. So these guys, we're getting them in different sizes, but the ones, I could talk about the two reports that we got, one in South Windsor and one over by the Metabasset in the Berlin Turnpike. One of them, the larger one was in the Berlin Turnpike, which I don't know if you're familiar with it, but there's a lot of trafficking and bad stuff that happens over there.
Yeah.
But it also connects to the Metabasset waterways and watershed, and that goes into the Connecticut River. The other report was down in South Windsor. So you give or take the same distance to a major body of water that is a watershed of the Connecticut River. Pale crawlers are, imagine a golem, sort of a skinless, pale, nasty kind of critter that, especially with the one in South Windsor, seemed to really enjoy following a person in a car. And this thing, we all see, you see that the street lights will go on and off, and that's a bimetallic strip, then the temperature just shuts it off, right? Mm-hmm. These things seem to have the ability to walk under them, shut them off, they leave, they come back on, go to the next one and shut it off. And so it seems to want to create darkness. They seem to be very affiliated with stone walls, which is unusual. And they appear, they don't have a mouth. So we like to keep it very, very much along the lines of biology, right? So I find that extremely hard to sort of wrap my mind around. But these are the reports we're getting. Another one right from the same area in the Berlin Turnpike was of a rake. And this thing, so the bed of a big 18-wheeler truck, and I've been in them, okay? You're talking when the bed's got to be a good 6 feet off the ground. We're maybe 3 at night. This guy is parked by a warehouse, and there's the lights, and he's getting ready to go to bed. And just before he was getting ready to call it a night, before he hit the road again, he told me he was watching some deer, and that he noticed some weird shadows in the spotlight on the building of the warehouse, and that then he saw this thing walk past, so shoulder length with the head. So now let's imagine 3 feet from that original bed of the truck, walk past, and that it then moved towards the direction of the deer. And shout out to you, Morningstar, for that report. No, we're definitely going to follow up on this. And then was in sort of pursuit mode of these nocturnal deer. And deer have transitioned with hunting to become much more nocturnal than they normally would. And that again, so a rake is real sort of a taller version of a pale crawler, and they are nasty. They will reoccur in your life. They're highly paranormal. They seem to love moose and deer. You go online and just look up rake and moose. Okay, you go on YouTube, you'll if you saw that thing at 11 feet tall, it would bother you too. And he was very scared. And we were able to give him some really good advice, because these rakes, when you encounter them, it's not just like a Bigfoot encounter where that's it, it's over. You know, you saw this thing, that's cool. You know, you're left with dealing with, do I now believe in what I saw? Or was it a bear? Which way do I want to go? A rake is going to reappear in your life, and it's going to cause health problems, and it's going to bring a lot of unhappiness, and it's going to reoccur, and it's going to get worse every time. You definitely want to contact somebody like Nicholas Robert Grossman. Definitely get yourself detached from that.
What's your opinion on why that happens? I mean, there's some kind of paranormal aspect to that, obviously. Like, why do you think that once you see them, it's not like seeing, as you said, a Bigfoot? All right, was that a bear? What was that? But then, like, you saw it and that's it until maybe you see it again some other time. But this one keeps reoccurring. Are there any theories of why and what that is?
I've been really trying to get more information to help our the people that report to us out. They seem to be sort of predatory, sort of psychologically predatory. And I know that dogmen will do this. They'll, especially with kids, children, they'll tap on the windows and let you see them and scare the crap out of you. You know, the big bad wolf.
Yeah.
So all I can say is, unlike dogmen, the dogmen just seem to enjoy scaring you.
Yeah.
But these rakes and these pale crawlers, they can sort of, they're parasitic like ticks or something. They're gonna feed off your energy, and it's definitely not good. And I'll tell you, so Connecticut, we might not be a hot spot for Bigfoot, like out on the West Coast or Whitehall, New York. We're definitely in the Appalachians, especially where I am. But we have a much higher percentage of like pale crawlers and rakes than what I'm seeing from other states. So there is some really, we have very, very unusual cryptids here, and we have a lot of them. We do have Bigfoots, but there seems to be much more going on with the creepy crawlers or pale crawlers, scary crawlers, whatever you want to call them. People don't even have names for them when they contact us. Never heard of anything like it.
Yeah, I wouldn't know what to call them either. Now, when they called you up, obviously you do an investigation. What did you find?
Oh, well, we find all kinds of evidence. I mean, well, so like in the case of a rape, we haven't followed up on that one, but we follow up on other reports. And you're going to travel on a stone wall in South Windsor. Well, I got to tell you, there's not going to be, if you're so these ones that are the little pale crawlers. I'm sorry, I should have mentioned they're reported about 3 feet tall.
Mhm.
And they're very similar to what you would get with a puck wedgie, except for the physical characteristics. But they, I don't quite know how to wrap my mind around it. But we certainly have a lot of them here, and I do get, you know, with ACES, with the American Cryptid Investigative Society, you get reports of other states, but they seem to be much more dogman Bigfoot type thing, and I don't. It's an ongoing thing. What kind of evidence do we get? Well, you saw probably our best evidence was when we followed up within 24 hours of being sent a photograph from Robin Swamp, and that was what we chose to focus on for the book. And we were able to locate the very same footprint. So we have a footprint from an eyewitness, and then we have our own footprint. And a lot of times, I would say most of the time, what we do is go more like a hunter would do. We go pursuing evidence that hasn't been reported to us by looking at state forests, understanding migratory patterns. What is the forage base? Where is the forage base? What kind of habitat are we dealing with? And what kind of folklore and history do we have? So we are sort of following up and seeking out.
Yeah. One of the areas, because you mentioned Robin Swamp, that was a big area for Bigfoot. But another area is in Thompson / Watertown, Black Rock.
Yeah, oh, that's great. Yes. That's one of our favorite. So did you see the video of
Yes.
that? So that report, I mean, you gotta love this report, was from the 70s, right? In a camper. So things were, of course, much different in the 70s. And that area would have been a little less developed than it is today. And of course, being part of the MDC, and I cannot, we could do a whole episode on the MDC. It stands for Metropolitan District Company. I call it mostly Deny Cryptids. They're sitting on the photographs of the lake monster in the West Hartford compensating reservoir. And they're sitting on, get this, between Connecticut and Massachusetts, 900 square miles of protected watersheds and forests that are absolutely no trespassing. So that Black Rock State Park abuts that. Our report from that lady going back to the 70s. In my video, I said it was a BFR report. No, and I need to correct that. That was a CCIS report. That was not reported to the BFRO. She reported that directly to us. And so the report goes on that they're camping, and I think the campground was laid up a little different back then, that it would have been closer to the river part. And she's having encounters sort of during her hikes, and nobody's believing her. And then we go right back to the culture of ridicule. Everybody, it's so easy to say, oh, that's a bear. Well, I see plenty of bears, and the only thing I mistake a bear for is usually a very big dog at first. Like, what the hell is that weird looking dog, right? So the report goes on that her and her father go out and they have an encounter, but come back together, and nobody believes them together. So it's her, the father, and they go back to the campsite. The night's going on. You'd imagine the fire drifting, and all of a sudden, this squatch jumps out, makes a howl, and throws a raccoon right at the group so that everybody saw it clear as day. Now, I suggest you watch the video because that's a funny one. We did some mathematics and artillery projections, and I think we estimated that the raccoon probably was flung like 1/8 of a mile, possibly at 45 miles per hour. And I forget, we had the angles, and we did a lot of fun with that one. But now, this is real interesting. What I don't think we followed up on is that after we put the video out there, somebody saw it in Oklahoma, and they reported a very similar thing where a Bigfoot, and of course in a different sort of environment, the plains of Oklahoma, threw an armadillo at some witnesses. And I don't know if we talked about that, but I think this is great that I can do that now, because you're given a raccoon's a member of the bear family, and that's gonna behave a little bit differently. An armadillo is gonna form into a nice little ball for you. So if I had my choice and I'm a Bigfoot, grumpy old Bigfoot, I'm just grumpy and old. I would much prefer an armadillo over a rabies bearing raccoon. We never could find out from either report if they were alive or dead. And if it was dead, then it was definitely Bigfoot using a biological weapon, which is awesome. You go, Bigfoot.
All right. Yeah, Bigfoot. Well, I want your opinion on this. I go to a lot of the paranormal conventions, and there was one in Rhode Island. I became friends with a Bigfoot investigator. His name is Bill Brock, and he has a theory about Bigfoot. He thinks that it's a Neanderthal man from way back that just never died. Do you have any opinions on what Bigfoot might be?
I have a lot of opinions. I mean, of course, you could, your most popular theory right now would be Gigantopithecus coming over from the Asian land bridge, and through the frozen Bering Sea and on into North America. And you have a surviving population, and then you sort of have the Neanderthal and wild man thing. And I find it just fascinating, to think about the two. And there's also Australopithecus, so there's another one. And then there's the Fiji Hobbit. So I think what you're dealing with is, I'd have to say, Bigfoot has not been biologically classified by Western mainstream science. I came up with, I think, is a Gigantocanadensis. was what I would like to say. But I think what you're dealing with, and especially with puck wedgies, is an intact display of the various hominids. We're sort of maybe the most populous, but I think there are Neanderthals, and I think there are Gigantos, and I think there are some of the Fiji smaller people, and I think they're all different types of hominids, and I think people are encountering them, like the report of the Winstead wild man going back to the 1800s, where it was a little bit before now, but it was when the blueberries arrived. So this guy's like traveling with his blueberries to go back. Imagine he's got a horse and cart and all that, and he's got his blueberries, and all of a sudden, this 11-foot tall, straight out of your typical cliche, caveman guy comes with a pelt and a club. Come on, no, this is great, right?
I love it.
He jumps out and says, and he was just covered in hair, jumps out and says, "Which way to town?" And the guy's shocked. He points to town, and the Winston wild man says, "Thanks," and heads in the other direction. So, I mean, right there, you're dealing with intelligence, if you ask me, but you're also dealing with linguistic skills, and being like the crazy guy now is okay, sort of.
Yeah.
I guess. Hi, everybody in my family out there. I'm the crazy guy. But back in the 1800s, that could really mess up your social standing. And we talk about culture of ridicule. Whoa. So he took a big chance to actually report this.
Well, yeah, I want to get back to Bigfoot. I love I was going to ask you about that. I'm glad you brought that up, the Winstead wild man. But I heard another theory about Bigfoot where some people think that they're aliens.
There seems to be an awful lot of connection. Honestly, now, when we started CCIS, and I love biology, so we really try to keep our investigations, to the biology. But I think there is a strong correlation with aliens and Bigfoot. I mean, look at mainstream media, look at Chewbacca. I mean, we're making movies that show a hominid, an upright cryptid ape guy communicating with humans. So and they're on this alien civilization. So the culture seems to be going there, and anytime culture sort of lays out folklore, of course that's just modern folklore, it's all based on something. Yeah, I think there could very well, there could absolutely be no reason why. And I think you'll like this. So I'm thinking about Bigfoot and its brain size, right? This big monster with this big brain. I think you could be dealing with a hominid that has a bigger brain than a human. And it wouldn't be a far stretch to say then more intelligent, possibly even technologically more advanced. I like to lean towards more of the Isaac Asimov thing and say, well, maybe it's so intelligent that it pursued the organic technology. And that's a real possibility. I'll say where the Bigfoot seem to be are the places where there seem to be a lot of activity. There seem to be an awful lot of forest lights, and I have seen my share of those investigating Bigfoots, and they are really strange. If you encounter them, they're very unsettling. It's not the kind of thing, first of all, you're ever expecting to encounter. But you are, I mean, when we're out there, we're investigating, so we're sort of open to that. But just seems to me there's an awful lot of forest lights associated with Bigfoots, and that certainly could open itself up to UFO encounters.
Have you had any people say they saw a UFO either before or after they had a Bigfoot encounter? Do you have any reports of that? Of like there were UFOs in the area around the same time that the Bigfoot was encountered?
We haven't had that kind of report. There was some stuff with that whole green whale that smashed into Bantam Lake, and that they called it the green whale. This big meteor. So that's what the state police called it. Well, this thing was, they called it the whale because it was the size of a whale, and it supposedly hit Bantam Lake. I can tell you as an avid fisherman that Bantam Lake is no deeper than 21 feet.
Mhm.
And if this, and it was reported as glowing green. And this 2017, this thing supposedly was flying in, leaving a green sort of burn trail. So I did a little research on how this could possibly happen. The only way this could happen is if this was a solid copper meteor, okay? That somehow this soft metal made it through the atmosphere, all right, big enough to be reported by the state police as a green whale. This thing, so any meteors coming in, I don't even know. Balls to the walls, right? It's moving. It's going to hit this lake. This is a highly, this is a residential lake, so there's a lot of development. Well, you have to imagine the size of the wake that would happen. First of all, this thing would fragment the minute it hit the water because of the heat. So all the shrapnel would be flying out. All kinds of water and steam would be all over the place. And it wouldn't just be some report by a state police saying it was a green meteor hitting Bantam Lake the size of a whale. It just mathematically doesn't make sense. There would be all kinds of commotion. As you know, when meteors hit any surface, water, earth, it doesn't just land gently and say, okay, thank you, that's it. Nothing to see here, just some crazy thing. But our other friends in the paranormal, I'm sure they get more UFO reports than we get. But I'll tell you, if you want to ask me, man, we get some really unusual reports. I could easily talk about that if you wanted.
Yeah, let's talk about it a little bit.
All right, so there's a park in New London of all places. So New London, not, that's down near Connecticut's shoreline where Old Lyme is, Plumgut Island, all kinds of weird animal research going on there. Oh, those geniuses on that island, they engineered insects with diseases, parasitic insects that like to ingest blood.
Well, wait, let's stop right there because I was going to get into that, and I know exactly what you're talking about. I told somebody this. I would rather have a bear come at me than go home with a tick because ticks scare the shit out of me because you think you're fine. Next thing you know, you're paralyzed. It destroys your nervous system. They said it's one strain away from syphilis. I saw a documentary on this. So since ticks, obviously, old Lyme disease. What's your theory on ticks?
Oh, they're engineered weapons. I mean, now you have Powassan disease, which is, occurs more in Texas, but it ties in perfectly with weaponized insects. And watch out for mosquitoes. That's coming next. And what about the geniuses on Plumgut Island, of course, a military biological weapon research facility. I mean, they say it right there. That's what they do. They engineer biology to be weaponized. So, insects are great. You could drop a whole bunch of insects over a little area. I mean, a little container, it could cover a large area. So they had cattle there on the island that were permanent residents. And of course, they would engineer their ticks and check the cattle. And, they're laboratory scientists. So, I mean, they have much more credentials than I do. And in their genius engineering, they forgot about seagulls. That seagulls could easily fly over, land on the freaking cows, and or just walk around like they do. Believe me, I'm from Maine. I know all about seagulls. It's what they do, and fly back and die or just drop them. And there they are. You have a breeding population of escaped insects from Plumgut Island. It's interesting because we talk about fishing. The striper fishermen would not fish downwind of Plumgut Island. And because of that, it's a very good fisheries. And here's just to make you really comfortable. They decided to take all the research off of the island and move it to Oklahoma, where where the largest cattle ranches are in America, so that there's no water to stop any sort of migration of anything they do. That's another one of, and I got to really pat them on the back. They're right up there with the MDC. You go research facilities. You just keep up the good work, man. You're just awesome.
Oh yeah, no sarcasm there.
A tiny bit, tiny bit.
So what year were they doing this? Are they still there? You said Oklahoma. What year were they in the New London area? Was this in the 60s, 50s?
Oh, they
Before?
would have been there that whole time. This was a very, I would say the move, now don't pin exact numbers on me, but this
Yeah.
happened in the 2020s,
Oh, so it's
or like in the 2000s. I'm sorry, forgive me.
okay.
Usually in the 2000s, once the ticks escaped, the thing is like Area 51. Once the sort of cat's out of the bag and all eyes are on you, you're this tiny island and you can just boat around, right?
Mhm.
You can get on there with some really high powered binoculars and really see what the heck is going on over there. Once the spotlight's on a place like that, it's really hard to keep it contained. So what the government does is like what they did in Dulce, you know, after Area 51, they just move it to another place until that gets found out. And they just
Yeah.
keep moving stuff around, and they're just dropping their little experimental bombs on society and not really cleaning up their messes. How can you?
Yeah. Sometimes maybe I mean, I'm theorizing. Maybe they're experimenting and then something will escape. It's sort of like a horror. Do you remember the movies of the 70s? All of them, like Prophecy,
Yes,
Day of
yes.
the Earth, Day of the Animals. Back then it was all about pollution, how it's ruining the earth, and then that started this whole thing. So it's similar, which is unfortunately that was just the movies. That was cinema. This is reality where they're doing these things and either they're escaping or they're releasing them out into the public, and it's just causing havoc. Like ticks are the perfect thing if they really want to destroy, because all their only job is to sit there and wait for somebody to walk by, jump on you. And now I see all these shows where not only do you get Lyme disease, which could destroy you, but also they have parasites in them, which cause a lot more havoc and wreak a lot more havoc on you. So it's just never ending. You go down that rabbit hole.
Well, you're dealing with some, you get down to the parasitic level, you get down to the virus level, you're dealing in microscopics. It's really hard. So, what brought us down this path, though, was the unusual reports. So there's a
Yeah.
park in New London, and forgive me, witnesses out there, but you wouldn't. This is, here's the thing, Rich. A lot of our reports aren't in like Connecticut's largest forest or the biggest lake in Connecticut. They're in like these very familiar sort of semi-rural suburban areas. So there's a park in New London, Bates Park. And now there's a lot of people that talk about there's like a gravel road entrance, which I'm getting the very beginning of CCIS, I was getting a lot of ghost reports from there. And a lot of people told me about it, but we did get a very, and I love, this is probably my favorite cryptid report. So this two guys were down there just hanging out, as two guys will do as the park is closing, God knows doing what, right? God bless them. Same thing we'd be doing. They're there, and all of a sudden they see what they describe to us as a 3 to 4 foot tall kangaroo with deer antlers. Now, of course, for me, and I've seen my share of jackalopes, and that's some taxidermy thing you sell to tourists. Um, but it's not. It was first of all, they were very disturbed. They were not happy with this. They really wanted us down to check this out. They like to go there, and they both were trying to convince each other that they weren't crazy, seeing this kangaroo which was hopping around and had like sort of small antelope pronged antlers. And I loved it. And I really need to, if anybody's down there at Bates Park, follow up for us. Send me something from there. Oh my God, I love it.
Does anybody have, I mean, I'm sure when you're in the middle of it, you're not thinking about, oh, let me take a picture of this. Does anybody have any kind of photographic evidence of these animals, or is it just the stories that you investigate right now?
The only photograph, there is two photographs. The lake monster woman, one of our very first, you'd have to go right to one of our first videos. I mean, I can certainly dig it up. Was of the West Hartford Compensating Reservoir, the pond closest to Farmington Avenue, which is, believe it, maybe 4 to 5 feet deep. And it's just a muck hole. It's this tiny little thing, you know. Got some nice sized bass because they don't allow fishing in it, and some real nice snapping turtles, which I believe could be a forage base, by the way. But so you can access these photos of this thing, and I was reaching out to this woman. I was talking with her, and she was just so hesitant to give me anything. I'm like, well, what did you do? You know, she made it to the newspaper. So this is something you can really look up easily. And the photographs are amazing. There's just these like claws reaching up out of the water, way better than any Loch Ness monster photo you'll see. Well, very primitive, very, very typical New England type aquatic predators, gray, slimy, definitely lethal looking. So, you know, and I'm like, could you just let me interview you, see the photographs, something, take me to where this happened? Nothing. So I said, well, what became of your evidence? And she said, well, I gave it to the visitor center of the MDC. You know, it's just like, well, there goes that. I mean,
Yeah.
you gave it to the authorities. We have photographic evidence that we brought from Robin Swamp, and there's not a lot. You really got to catch Connecticut habitat when it's sort of mushy and soft. We've been having this drought here. You're not going to get a whole lot of tracks. So to directly answer your question, we've had 2 cases of people sending photographs. Most of it is this happens. It's like seeing a bear. All right, you see a bear, you're driving along, all of a sudden there's this bear. Well, you don't think to grab your camera and take a photo, and by the time you do, the encounter's pretty much over. It's not like UFOs or ghosts. You can get this to reoccur. We try to get them to reoccur, but they're animals. They're
Yeah.
moving around, and most of them seem to happen at night, and especially the crawlers. You know, so it's really hard to get any physical photographic evidence, but we certainly get the reports.
Yeah. Now, a lot of times when you are investigating these reports, I know you said you found a couple of footprints, but do you find any other evidence that there was something there in that area? An example would be did you investigate yourself the kangaroo? We get that word out with the antlers.
I had our historian follow up on that, and there was not sort of anything that she found
Okay.
or could dig up in the history. This cryptid's very unique.
Yeah.
And that's what's, I think I hinted on that early on. Our cryptids tend to be very unique, like Mantis Man, again, in New London. So there's a lot going on in New London. Do we get to every spot? Unfortunately, no. But we certainly have our thumb on the pulse of our hot spots when we go there. We've been to Meriden extensively, and we don't, unfortunately, especially with the new business, get time to go to every single location. We are trying to set up, we have some field members, especially after Paracon, that are willing to go to some of the further away places like Patchogue State Forest. There's a lot going on there, and Trail 2. And but we get out. Yeah.
Well, I want to go to Meriden after this, but I want to follow up with some Bigfoot questions, because first question I have for you is, do you find that besides the raccoon being thrown at them at rapid speed, do you find the Bigfoot or violent creature?
Well, I think it's like a black bear. I mean, you're dealing with an animal. So you're going to exist in the Northeast. Well, you're not going to exist on kale raided from your neighbor's garden. You're gonna have to be a predator. And like a predator, like us, you got forward vision, you got bicuspid, you got canine teeth. So you're upright, which is a real advantage, especially if you're 11 feet tall. But I don't think you're dealing with again, you might be dealing with something smarter than you. And that's really hard for a human to wrap their mind around. We like to think we're it. We are the #1 badass on this planet. And that's not the case.
Yeah.
So I think you wouldn't want to mess with a Squatch mom and her babies. I don't think you'd want to mess with the day watchers, which are people are encountering during the day in the state parks. They have, from what I believe, they have day watchers which sort of scout the areas out, make sure nobody gets messed with while they're sleeping. And you wouldn't want to mess with those guys. They tend to be your 800-pound, big, massive guy, my cousin Tubby from Maine. Yeah, you don't mess with, no. But I think you're dealing with something that just wants to be left alone. Is very aware of you, but you not so much of them, and might harbor a little anxiety and trepidation of the human culture. And I think, like the Patterson Gimlin, and I do that walk all the time. I think once a day I do the Patterson Gimlin. That whole
Yeah.
And but I think you're dealing with a creature that doesn't want an encounter.
Yeah.
But certainly, I mean, you go back to the early days when prospectors were going out to California, and that famous guy there, he got abducted for several days and escaped by the Bigfoot taking his chewing tobacco and thinking it was food, and got sick, and he was able to run out of the cave. So I think it could certainly go bad for you if you were threatening in any kind of way. So hunting a Bigfoot, not a good idea. Following up, investigating a Bigfoot, absolutely a great idea.
I love that idea. I want to go investigating with you sometime. We talked.
Oh yeah, and I say it's very therapeutic. Yep. For the low cost, I'll cut you a deal, Richard, for like $59.99. I'll take you out. We'll find the best sticks. You can smack some trees. You can howl. You can get it all out. You don't need a license. There's no closed season. There's no restricted areas. You're not going to get in trouble with the wardens. Well, I haven't yet.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I'll even throw in the extra penny, make it an even 60. To me, it's worth it.
Oh, it's free.
Money is no object for this.
Come on. Well, I'd love to take you out. I'd love to take you out.
We will definitely be talking off the air. I love this stuff, and I would love to go.
Now available in one collection. Confessions of a Frenetic Mind. 5 tales of blood-curdling terror. Available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble.
All of a sudden I hear, brim, brim.
What's a diaphragm again?
Ha! We caught one.
They're supposed to be weird.
Oh, yeah, no. If you say so.
I've always wanted to be in a movie.
Waiting around for autumn, I was watching.